This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard. The whole thing is available on all major podcast providers.
Скандальная, очень короткая жизнь Мэри Wollstonecraft, умершая.
Mary Wollstonecraft, nata nel 1759, è stata autrice.
It's now a controversy of international proportions. Critics have had their knives out for a silver statue in London honouring feminist icon Mary Wollstonecraft. The row is because it features a naked woman. Earlier today, protesters covered it up. Would you see a male political figure without his pants on, they've asked. The sculptor, Maggi Hambling, told the Evening Standard the complainers are missing the point, and the statue is not of Mary Wollstonecraft, but an every woman who has to be naked because clothes define people. It does have its defenders, including historian Dr Christina Faraday, who spoke to the Evening Standard's Bonnie Christian.
Critics are saying it would have been more appropriate to commemorate Mary Wollstonecraft with her clothes on. What do you make of the statue being naked?
Well, I think obviously we are used to seeing the more traditional kind of statue of a clothed man. But that in itself is a very traditional, patrician, patriarchal mode of public commemoration, which really kind of took off in the 19th century, although obviously its roots are much older. And I think this campaign is actually trying to get away from that whole mode of commemorating a historical figure. So it's a sculpture, not a statue, and it's not doing this traditional thing of representing a particular person at a moment in time. It's more trying to provoke a debate about Mary Wollstonecraft's ideas. Now, you might question the use of a body for a writer who was so interested in the equality of souls. You might also question the use of a slim, idealized, young, able-bodied woman to represent an every woman. But we are dealing with representational art here, and it's really hard to represent an abstract idea such as a feminist struggle or the soul without resorting to these common and easily recognisable symbols.
I wanted to put this quote to you. One critic has said, "Nameless, nude and conventionally attractive is the only way women have ever been acceptable in public sculpture." What do you make of that in this context?
Yeah, that is obviously a problem that women have faced throughout the centuries. But I'm not sure it's the case that it always has to be seen in the same pro-patriarchal terms. The artist is a gay woman, and the sculpture was chosen after a long consultation with the public. And this sculpture was chosen because the alternative was by a man. And there was a big outcry about that 2 years ago. So I think, of course, the fact that Maggi Hambling is a gay woman doesn't mean she's immune to this kind of patriarchal structure which dominates society. But I think it should give critics some pause for thought. What are you trying to achieve by attacking her work? And of course, you can debate the choices that any artist makes. But to me, the level of outrage here seems a bit out of proportion.
Do you think we would be having this same debate if this was a sculpture of a man?
Well, there are statues of naked men. There are some very peculiar sculptures of there's a semi-naked Lincoln at the LA courthouse. Samuel Johnson in St. Paul's shows him in a very revealing toga. And of course, historically, nudity for men and nudity for women have meant very different things. But I think that it doesn't rule out a reclamation of nudity for women necessarily. And I think this is something that's worth debating rather than just dismissing out of hand.
There's more on this story, including Maggi Hambling's response to the row in the Evening Standard and at standard.co.uk. Now.
Fast feet, lift those knees up. Pump the arms. Faster.
Joe Wicks was one of the heroes of the first lockdown. He got an MBE for keeping our kids fit with his YouTube PE lessons while schools were closed. He's back at it this time round too, but in an extraordinarily honest interview with the Evening Standard's Susannah Butter, the seemingly invincible body coach is admitting he's tired and the attention has been getting to him and his family. Susannah's with me now, and I think in your chat, Joe sounds like a lot of people in lockdown too, just plain weary of it all.
He's kind of, reaching that phase of, we've done this before, gosh, we've got to, and he spoke in a very Joe Wicks way about trying to deal with those feelings and make himself feel better. His approach is to not feel powerless about the situation and kind of be very present in the moment, realise what you're lucky for. But still, it's getting to him. But I think by talking about that and sharing that with everyone who I think will feel the same, that's such a brave, lovely thing to do.
It is a very Joe Wicks thing to do throughout his entire career since he began on Instagram. He's always shared just about everything with his audience. I wonder if, though, now that he's reached a kind of new level of stardom because of how well he was received during lockdown, he's maybe a little bit worried about what that did.
I think his instinct is very naturally open, kind of refreshingly open, more open than a lot of people who aren't even famous. But since PE with Joe, there were people outside his house, which I think he struggled with, but also he struggled with thinking about how that impacts his family, because he's got an 11-month-old and a daughter who's about to turn 2. And he spoke very movingly about leaving the house with Indy, his daughter, and the paparazzi being there and not liking that. And they were living right on the main road. And then fans sending him letters and gin and marmalade, strangely. I didn't know he liked that, but why not? So he is still sharing that he's moved house away from a main road to get a bit more privacy.
And of course, moving house means leaving that room, the one he did PE with Joe with, which millions of people watched him doing those exercises every morning, keeping the nation's children fit. It became a bit of an icon of the first lockdown. I'd imagine, even for him, it must be sad for him to leave that space.
I think he's all right. He's got his lovely new house and he's very kind of looking on the bright side. I mean, he misses that room because it was, we all know, like the guitars on the wall and the fireplace. He's not unpacked his guitars yet, which means he's not playing them as much. I think there's also a sense of thinking about his own relationship with social media in terms of his mental health, because he watched Life, like many of us again, he watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix and is trying to ration his screen time. So having 2 hours a day where he doesn't look at his phone so that he can fully concentrate on being with his children.
It is an incredible interview, a very moving interview, which everyone listening should read. It strikes me as a man who maybe feels like he's lost a bit of control and is now going to regain it. He's taking those steps, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. He's very, very proactive, although he's about to do something where it sounds like he probably won't have much control, which is a 24-hour fitness challenge on children in need, where he just has 5-minute breaks every hour to eat or go to the toilet, which I think he was quite funny about. He just said it's going to suck. But what's amazing about Joe Wicks is that he's really driven to actually be good and make a change. And in a way that I think is interesting this year, when you compare him to, say, Marcus Rashford, I think they've got a lot in common. And it's this sense of not waiting for the government or some other official body to do something, but actually using a phone and a few videos and the internet, getting out there and making people do burpees and press ups and boosting their mood.
And you can read Susannah's interview in the Evening Standard and online at standard.co.uk. That's the Leader Podcast. We're back tomorrow.